Of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 35. Liara brought breakfast. It was lovely, and Kara determined that the trip out to Beckenstein had apparently turned into a team effort while she was sleeping. Kara now had Dr. Shakwas' help, and she did not think she had nightmares. Did not remember if Thane had been in her room. Didn't wake up with him in bed with her. She wouldn't be willing to bet that he hadn't been there, considering his potential for skulk. He'd executed other plans, seemingly, since she could take care of herself for one night. Thane and Liara were in cahoots. Well, technically cahoots meant they were doing it secretly. They were doing it blatantly, and she was high-stakes fashionista tag-teamed by experts. Thane revealed the dress, and it was a good thing he hadn't pulled it out at the same time as the shoes. She would have cried. It was made of thin panels of draped scarlet over the shoulders, down to a neckline that was... It was definitely not what she'd discussed and yanked up so many times. This was a deep V. Come on, Thane. Please. Please. No. She managed to not beg out loud. The cloth was all slink, and the same color as the shoes. Fine netting connecting some panels and exposing skin, gathered at the waist and left to fall into a skirt that would only come mid-thigh. It wasn't... It was terrible. It was beautiful, and it was terrible. She couldn't describe how, except for too short. And yes, that's technically covered, but... She looked at Thane and pleaded. I can't wear that. Thane said, along with a tilt of a haughty brow ridge. You can, and you will. Liara said, Kara, it's beautiful. I don't think you understand. Liara looked to Thane for support, but he was only looking at Kara, accepting her criticisms and concerns, but dismissing them for already defined reasons. Liara clearly wanted him to explain how much it was worth, or the designer consulted, or Thane's direction in creating it. Liara was personally offended, ready to duel for the dress's honor. There were layers to Thane's approach that Liara didn't see, but Kara did. And it was again a moment of Thane theoretically colluding with Liara. But if Liara wished for him to echo her argument, he would not. He would ignore Liara and look at Kara, expecting her to understand. And she did. He told her the line, told her the expectation, and she had enough experience by now to know to do it. He was driving at only one possible conclusion with finesse, and not a hammer. It came down to this, and they both knew it. He was willing to give his life, drain his bank account, subvert his own existence to serve her discovered but not expressed needs professionally and personally, and do all of those things with dedication and devotion, regardless of his personal wishes and needs. Was she not willing to walk and talk in return for Kasumi's life and loyalty? Was she unable to express devotion, if not to Thane, then to her bondmate, who required her public charade to protect him? If Liara handed him a hammer, he would politely put it down. If she attempted to use it, he would disarm her. If Kara walked away at this moment over something petty, like inches he demanded on a neckline, inches that Liara insisted were necessary and beautiful, The insult would be enormous. It would be unforgivable. But he would accept her choice with grace and go himself, complete the mission without her. She still tried to beg for situational mercy because she knew only he could let her off the self-imposed hook. But it seemed he would insist that the self-imposed hook was necessary. It was, and it wasn't. And he didn't have to enjoy it so much. Although Kara did know through osmosis and the attitudes of the people working with Thane as he designed and commissioned her clothing that it was exceptional, expensive, and inspiring covetous glances, he would not mention money. He downplayed his contributions as much as possible, describing it always in terms of it being a suitable setting for her. It existed as it did, and she would wear it because it would suit the moment. He would not accentuate the dress's importance, but it was an expression of taste and knowledge of fashion, something elegant and artistic. He overruled her attitudes as objectively inferior. Would she insist on inferior attitudes to spare herself some embarrassment when the dress should make her feel like the queen of the room? She risked her life and other lives at a moment's notice, but a few inches of skin were an impossible sacrifice to make. Liara was asking her to be worn by the dress. Thane expected her to rise to the requirements of Siha. The dress, in his mind, despite Liara's leanings, would not be the prime player. It was very much like how he had designed the apartment and given it to her. He had created something, he had given it to her, and that was all she needed to know. There would be no reimbursement, and mentioning the expense would potentially give Kara another reason to balk. If he never mentioned expense or effort, they could not be considered debts. He would not give her that strategic wedge. Kara understood all that, and said with no grace, "It appears to be not so much interested in covering than revealing." Thane smiled. "The coverage is adequate. I would prefer less, but I am aware you would not leave any room wearing it, unless you were also wrapped in a blanket, if that were the case." It was a deep V. Liara said, "You are going to have to learn to sit in that dress." Kara's eyes closed. And here I thought I'd mastered walking and sitting. She looked briefly to Thane, who seemed amused, convinced of the outcome where Liara was still negotiating. Thane knew it would go his way. He had gone to a great deal of trouble. Kasumi would not be put in danger out of her desperation. And that's all Kara needed to be motivated to follow Thane's lead. He seemed unconcerned about the mission itself, more interested in nail polish, a properly styled wig, and arranging for full body makeup. Liara had enthusiastically supplemented the experts with more experts. Liara said, "Why is it that if we were discussing mining techniques for Ezo, you would be rapt, but something this beautiful does not get your attention?" "Because I'm not going to be, mined. Maybe I am in that." "Oh, that was bad. Don't say that again. Do not say strip mined. Don't. Change course." "I have a new concern." I will be cold. I know. I won't be shot. Theoretically better. I appreciate the care and attention. I do. That was for Liara's benefit. Thane already understood. His gaze was steady, amused, and assured of the outcome. His eyes near sparkling with the slip of the reference to being mind. Garrus said to Liara in order to dispel the current of power brought to bear and the intimacy in Thane's gaze. Thank you for your help. I do want to get it right. I apologize if I'm ingracious. Liara said, looking at the dress almost with envy, that dress buys a lot of grace. Kara would have said something about Liara wearing it, but the mental image would have more coverage issues, and Kara didn't want to force the room to imagine that inadvertently as a joke. She definitely didn't want to see Thane's face when he saw her walk right into that one like a puppy into a hornet's nest. He would politely point out the hornets and suggest methods of recognition and avoidance, and he'd have more fun than should be allowed. He considered Kara's face with a smile, and she smiled back. She was still grateful every day that he was on her side. She was also more aware of potential hornets. She was also about to walk into a real nest of them like a puppy on an expensive scarlet leash. Oh. Well, she was glad she didn't say that out loud either. There were hours of preparation on the day of the party because she required full body makeup. She had been unbelievably naive about the process. Makeup in her mind meant rub something on skin, and you're done. Nope. This was not that. Thane had delivered her to a salon, and only told her with a smile, "This is where I leave you, and where you must be brave." You're a terrible person, Thane. This has been established, Garrus. You are not permitted to kill or disagree with the staff. Check. I can't be a terrible person. Only you. He left her with his version of respectful, appreciative smirk and a kiss on her brow. She felt successfully delivered to ritual sacrifice. And when they said full body, they meant full body. Freckles and exposure and netting meant eliminating potential makeup lines. Gaps in the fabric and shifts meant body hair removal. She'd get to keep the hair on top of her head, but that hair would be under a wig. She underwent full body application of makeup skin tone with sealant so that it didn't rub off on contact. Removable later with a solvent, some completely unbelievable as advertised reassurance that it was good for the skin, nutritive and rejuvenating. How could that possibly be true in any way? She needed to be cured under special lights to set it. She was offered alcohol, which seemed necessary to the process, but she put her tiny foot down and asked steadily but politely, "Apple juice, please." Nobody's eyes bugged out, and she got chilled apple juice in a lovely cut crystal goblet that made her nervous, so she didn't drink it. She didn't want to explain the itemized bill. Not that she'd see it. She imagined it being delivered to Thane. Stripping of personal dignity, 478 credits. Overvalued, in our opinion. Broken Goblet, 1,208 credits. Dealing with Clients' Attitude, 4,500 credits. Changing Her Skin, 0 credits. We didn't like it. We did it for free. Thane had likely told them to give her anything she wanted unless it involved deviating from his prescribed course. She was not going to make their job harder. She said a lot of, "Yes, ma'am," and "Yes, sir," and continued to tell herself that she was not going to be shot. Kasumi was not going to be shot. Garrus would be safe. Women did this every day. Well, not every day, but women had done this and paid for this, and she couldn't really describe all the ways it made her uncomfortable and ready to flee. She felt them in rapid succession. The physical exposure was unpleasant, but this just had a slick, oily slide into the unknown and barely described or imagined. There was the feeling of being a thing that was being processed. The feeling of being corrected. The feeling of being standardized. The feeling of her heritage and connection to her mother stripped away. The feeling of not recognizing herself. She had always been riotously freckled, and this was like seeing the ghost of her own skin. All character removed. It seemed that removal of character was beauty incarnate. As much as attendants might try to make her feel that she was being pampered, what was happening was that she was being processed. She couldn't get past it, the silent, almost monastic air of the spa, as though religious rites were taking place. She was a heretic in the halls of the sanctum of fashion, and the formulas would boil on her skin like consecrated water in a font in the presence of an unbeliever. It would not work because she did not have faith. She focused on remembering that this was for Kasumi. It was for Garrus. Not me. Not Thane. She suspected the dress was still for Thane, but she was doing this for Kasumi and for Garrus. And I will never come back here, ever, and I will never agree to anything like this again. She reminded herself that this was intended to make her not look like herself on purpose, and that future settings would be more suitable. She wouldn't be a ghost again. False hair, false lashes, false nails, false everything was applied. Before this, she'd only had a few days of clothes fitting, which were an inconvenience but bearable. She had appreciated her new clothes, though they made her careful in ways she didn't really want. She was always aware of leaning on something, or not leaning on something, or splashing a drink, or dropping food. She had been appreciative of rich fabrics and pleasing colors and forms, but he had not attempted makeup or hairstyle. She'd been aware of having little in the way of feminine grace, which was fine with her. She hadn't really attempted to gather any during her lifetime. Practically, if she tried to look like this every day, she'd have to spend hours at it. It seemed, as it always had been, a waste of time and effort, time taken from study and undistracted contemplation. If she got powdered sugar on a loose, cheap shirt, she didn't care or notice. Since she mostly sat alone in her room and told people what to do, she'd always been much more concerned with convincing someone with an argument than with her appearance. Well, no. That wasn't true. She dressed her opinions very carefully as Shepard. As carefully as Thane was dressing her now. Intelligence was an asset that not everyone could attain. But with this much work, with enough alteration, enough care for fashion, enough money, enough self-denial, lack of leaning and powdered sugar, most anybody could be beautiful. She had lied every day of her life after her rescue. She suddenly saw the hypocrisy of her attitude. She spent hours and hours in thought, constructing a strategy or an argument, until she was good at it on the fly. She had always assumed makeup to be a process that was easier and cleaner and taking less effort, but also delivering much less of an effect. It was something she'd really never thought about. Something she wasn't interested in. Her mother wore no makeup. That was good enough for her. She'd never investigated it. Now her image of a fairly wholesome, if inconvenient, practical art of just looking prettier than you might with a little effort became so much more insidious and costly and powerful. She was suddenly interested, deeply interested, in the psychology of a hidden world she had imagined to be one set of surface behaviors, and then, on being asked to delve into it, despite her resistance to the subject matter, because she believed she'd already comprehended it, she found something else. She saw the facile layers of involvement she'd believed to be true. There were those who took no care in appearance, then people like her that considered clean and combed to be sufficient, then those who took 5 minutes to apply gloss or mascara, and she'd always assumed the striation ended there. Maybe people stood in front of the mirror a little bit longer or shorter. Even extending the behavior to going to salons, it seemed reasonable, like a haircut in the military. She'd never been anywhere other than places that offered military haircuts. In, out, straightforward, and utilitarian. Now the potential practices and outcomes dipped precipitously into the realm of those who spent their lives at it. Not just adornment, but costuming, creating a religion and a business model that had persisted. She blinked, no longer seeing herself. If the world's oldest profession was theoretically prostitution, right before that came stylist. This salon did high business for people who altered every detail about themselves to conform to symmetry and fascination. It was a church, and as subtly textured and shaded as Mindor, seemingly simple from the outside, but complication and depth only arose with experience and immersion. She had a razor focus now, and the ghost of her skin was an effective costume. She knew who to be, and she imagined Thane's motivations in attempting to shift her perspectives. Despite her protests and concerns for herself, he knew there had been a potential that she would be drawn in by the process. Cautiously, but inescapably curious. If she were ineffective, he would ask her to please step out of the way and not attempt to follow in heels, for her to remain safe, and he would kill everybody there. She would be effective. She would pay attention. If she wanted to understand people, not the way she already thought they were, logical and ordered, she needed to see them as they were, adhering to as many strange ways of thinking or behaving as she did herself. And she was nowhere near as logical or ordered as she had always believed herself to be. Layers of illusion were applied by acolytes of fashion, and Kara's eyes changed from curious and tentative to fascinated by the rites and the transformation, trying not to be repelled, trying to be appreciative of the opportunity to learn. She could not afford to be gauche or ineffective or so distracted by personal discomfort that it kept her from doing her job. She felt a spontaneous moment of joy that Garrus didn't love her for her appearance, as artful contouring and artifice applied by experts of steady hand and topographical possibility revealed a classically, symmetrically processed, beautiful woman who wore violet contacts and had a sleek black-styled bob that was impossible according to gravity. Thane had been correct. Necklines were serious business. She was fascinated. Not a convert, not at all. She wanted her skin back more than ever. But she was fascinated. Thane might have given her this opportunity patiently, wondering if she would really see, the same way she might have taken him on a tour of the streets of Mindwar. It was personal, and it was subjective, and deeply intimate. And he could not have been assured that she would see that he was granting her an opportunity to tour the Master's workshop. He knew the power of artifice, and he could save a life with it. He could take a life with it. He was sharing at least some of what he knew with her in order to help her protect what she so desperately needed to protect. She remembered him saying, "You require people like me to kill for you. There is a need. That need is rewarded handsomely. My consent led to reward, not ethical superiority." She imagined the branching depth of the word makeup and the words assassin training, as though makeup were something rubbed on the skin in 5 minutes, and assassin training consisted of him learning how to stab in different ways for 6 years before his first kill. So she had the ethical superiority covered, didn't she? She had that, and the ignorance he'd observed in her. He was giving her this opportunity to appreciate something of value. And she could take it or leave it. Liara's opinion regarding his expertise or care were irrelevant to him. If Kara did not care, neither would he. The evening would be over as she fussed and complained, and he became disappointed, amused, or impressed by her. The evening was guaranteed to be amusing, certainly. He'd accomplish his mission no matter what. She either seized an opportunity or did not recognize it as such. It would be a bit like watching her play checkers with Ponifa pieces. Kara could always be counted upon to be adorable and amusing, couldn't she? He had given her the opportunity to be drawn from helpless ignorance to educated competence. She was not a convert to fashion, but she did see its power. She was not a convert to Shepard's persona, but she saw her power. Kara would stay who she was, with riotous skin and powdered sugar and a Drell who smiled either way, adorable, amused, or impressed. It did not matter to him. Except she believed she preferred to impress him, and he knew that as well. When the layers were completed, when the perfumes and pigments and shading were all applied, she stared. She realized if she'd passed herself on the street, walking in here a few hours ago, she would have seen a beautiful woman. A naturally beautiful woman who spent 5, maybe 10 minutes on putting herself together like this. Someone with a gift of natural beauty. She wouldn't be jealous, exactly. She had her own gifts, and she preferred her own gifts, her own skin. But she saw the power of illusion, and especially the danger of ignorance. Thane had given her a gift, and she couldn't unsee it. She should pay attention. She was under the free, devoted, and indulgent tutelage of a master of the craft. He had earned that craft at high cost. People had died to that craft. People admired that craft. She had often believed he'd offered his services for free out of... what? Now it seemed terribly naive to think that he'd decided to fight collectors only out of the goodness of his heart. In retrospect, that seemed not only terribly, but dangerously naive and ignorant. Now, she realized she could not afford him. Nobody would be able to buy his expertise or devotion. That was a time in his life that was over. He chose his contracts and their worth, and he had chosen priceless. He gave his considerable skill and attention for his own reasons, and just like fashion, they were intended to look effortless. Her attempt to determine what his motivations were because she was suddenly inspired was the theoretical jump from, now I know makeup takes more than 5 minutes, and considering it to be a coup of understanding. That would be the same as someone walking onto the CIC of the Normandy, asking to fire the Thanix, and thinking they were the ruler of all worlds. She spent some time thinking, but not with any expression on her new face. Expressions altered the art intended to be shorn of character. She was aware more of her face. She remembered some of Thane's advice when she tried to speed along in heels. A beautiful woman makes the worlds wait for her, La Somme. Your face often holds the expression, when you move, that you are focused on where you wish to go. Learn to walk as though you are someone to be. You have no destination. You are someone else's destination. The mountain will come to you, or the mountain is unworthy. The makeup was intended to create an expression, adding her own distorted it. Submerged in a costume, it did dictate many of her actions, restricted her movements and expressions. Her ears had been pierced, and she had earrings now. Platinum and ruby falls of filigree with a matching lavalier drop of pave rubies set in a sinuous rope that hung in the deep V of the dress. Now she saw the necessity for the set, and the inches, and his insistence. Necklines were serious business, and so was matching jewelry. She chose to not sit, waited where he told her he would meet her. She had learned how to sit, how to walk, distinct and controlled movements that suited more delicate material and draping, with her knees together, her feet not flat on the floor, but feet to the side, toes down, heels up. Deliberate grace. Now she needed to control the distractions of the swing of new jewelry and the flutter of panels and the gaps possible, maintaining newly appreciated lines and artistry that created a seamless whole that took, likely, hundreds of thousands of credits. His knowledge of fabric, color, the possibilities of them, the assistance of salon, tailor, and jeweler, allowing her entry to a gathering where her appearance alone would prove she belonged there. He wasn't in the foyer as she waited, and then he was, and she wondered if he'd been watching her. She had only been there for a few minutes. He did not look like himself. What he had asked of her, he had done himself. He was no longer green. Every patch of what had been green, every tiny speckle and spot that had been green, was now scarlet, and as many tones as his green had been, and even though she had just gone through her transformation, she had no idea how his was accomplished. He looked no more or less flawless than he always did, but his carriage, that was so often retiring and non-threatening around her, was now overtly menacing. Goosebumps rose on already exposed skin. She felt the flush that wasn't visible now thanks to his planning. She had been expertly painted, but he was transformed. So many small changes to his carriage, to the tension around his eyes, his mouth, to his center of gravity, and the way he walked. She realized Thane Krios must be a set of behaviors, a set of reached expectations. She realized for the first time that Thane Krios couldn't be his real name. This was a special occasion, but it indicated the discipline he maintained every day. All the effort put into wardrobe and speech and mannerism. Was green his true color? Was this his true color? Did true have any meaning in this context? And was that the question he was driving her to ask very carefully? At his throat was what looked like a healed slash, a jagged scar across the smooth flesh of his neck and across his frill at an angle that just happened to draw the eye down to his chest. In essence, his jewelry and adornment. His chest was exposed, much more than usual. Black and scarlet tailoring in fine-grained leather and inset netting that echoed hers, but with a wider weave. Further scarred skin visible on his chest, abdomen, and thighs. He had stripes. Artfully framed and scarred stripes. She had no words, ignored her gooseflesh, and the shiver seeing him produced. She remembered what he had said to do if she felt lost. Smile at me as though you are planning on killing me, and you have just discovered how. Benis Karat did not speak often, she recalled. She had her script, her costume, and now she needed to apply it. She smiled at him, as though she were planning on killing him, and that she would make him wait for her to do it. That if he believed he were the mountain, that was no challenge. She had many a mountain waiting for the privilege of dying at her hands. The transformation in him was further jarring when he opened his mouth to speak. His voice was rougher, deeper, with a catch to it that sounded like his voice had been damaged by the injury to his throat. There is a word in Drell, Dralatem, for something that once seen creates a perfect memory. A treasure that cannot be taken, valued beyond all others that were once held dear. You are Dralatem. She continued to smile. He took her hand and placed it on his forearm. They walked to the shuttle. She walked slowly, remembering lessons of balance and speed, and he matched her pace. They drew attention, heads turning, and exclamations, whispers, and dumbstruck gazes. Awe, hunger, and coveting. She wondered briefly why Liara wasn't there, and then she realized Thane likely did not extend an invitation. The trip to Bekenstein would take only an hour and a half. With his new voice and the realization that he could be in character, speaking in theory to Allison Gunn, she did not want to shatter the careful bubble by breaking her own character. She didn't want Liara to see. She did not want to call Garrus to show him. He knew they were doing this, and that she couldn't call on schedule. She didn't want to call him at all as a ghost. This moment was of necessity, shadowed, shaded, sufficient coverage, but too exposed. And clearly, Benis did not wish to share his Dralatem. She did not wish to be displayed as something inspiring awe, hunger, and coveting. Something or someone Garrus would never touch. If she could explain it, she might try, but she didn't think she could. She knew if she said to Garrus, "Thank you for loving me for my character," She already knew that he did that it was redundant to say. It would be painful to say, but look at all this effort he made on my behalf. A man you know is in love with me and is willing to kill you for me. Isn't she lovely? No, she was not lovely. There was no explanation for what she was. Again, 0.1% and improbable, impractical. And she could hear in Garrus's voice.
Can't you see?
Yes, I see.
Turn around right now. Scrub it off and go back. It's not worth it.
It's worth it. I need this. She did not want to have that conversation at all. Benes Karat did not speak, and neither did Allison Gunn, as she sat in the shuttle carefully, mind whirling with implications of nuance and shade. She treasured her natural character, but did not want to express it in this dress, adorned and priceless, dangerous dralatum that would potentially save a life. She wished to save a life, not scourge a soul. If anybody's soul was going to be scourged, it would be hers, and not Garrus's. It certainly would not be Benes Karat's soul. Just like Allison Gunn, who was a ghost. Benes Karat didn't appear to have a soul.